Good question.
Thank you very much, and I just want to thank the two witnesses there this morning. And you know, I was reading this last night, and you know, there's a lot of this is so important. And again, it's about legislation, and what we were saying earlier on, we can't rush this now. But there is the concern, and you have said it in your submission there about the Joint Committee on Health 2019. There has been no communication between the Department of Health or the our stakeholders since 2019, and we're now in 2022. So that is a huge concern. It's a huge concern for us, because we're, as we've said previously, we're meant to be only a 3-month committee. And so it's important now that everybody, you know, particularly people are in the field that understand more and, you know, have more statistics and figures, and we're learning all the time, which is so important. So that's just something that I think worries us, and it worries me in particular as well. I just want to ask you, Doctor, about an upper age limit should be specified. A previous submission by the Institute of and the gynaecologist suggested 40 years. You might just come back to me on that and why that has been recommended on that. My other question is now just about, you spoke about counselling, and I just want to know, what type of counselling would you suggest would be best for those going through surrogacy? You know, I think that's so important, and I know that's been spoke about as well for the AHR bill. And I just want to ask you, I know IVF has become, I suppose, myself working with families over the years, IVF has become, so many families have contacted me about it, to be honest, and I'm sure you must see this yourself. Can you tell me more about the funding issues that you experience? Because I know there's people who have come to me that they can't afford it, and I just feel it's an issue that we need to address. And I just think it's something I'm sure that you would probably have more information on for me. And again, just they're my 3 questions, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. The first was, I suppose, just with the communications with the Department of Health. I think that's really important, and we, all of my colleagues in all the fertility clinics around the country and in maternity hospitals, you know, are willing to engage in any communications and work. I suppose we have to say that the COVID pandemic and the cyber crisis in our health service didn't help over the last 2 years, but we did have meaningful discussions before, and I think we are close to having really good legislation, but we do need some further dialogue prior to that. I would hope we could get it completed by the end of this year, which would be great. So I really don't want it to be delayed too long, but I don't think I don't think it will be ready before the summer recess.
Okay.
Regarding an upper age limit, we know that pregnancy becomes more complicated as women get older. So things like all medical conditions complications that can arise in pregnancy, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, bleeding in pregnancy, all of those, so not to do with the baby itself, but to do with the actual mother's health, get more common as women get older. So most international bodies, and there are medical international guidelines about surrogacy, so there are American ones, European ones, and there are worldwide ones, and they all recommend an upper age limit of somewhere between 40 and 45 for the surrogate, because it's just, again, you want to protect the surrogate, so you don't want to have somebody who has any medical conditions, because any pregnancy for any woman, we all know it's getting safer and safer, but it's not without risk, and you really do want to protect the surrogate. So, you know, it would be important that we would suggest not that she's 40 or less, 45 at the very most, that she has had previously healthy pregnancies and uncomplicated pregnancies, and that she doesn't have any major medical conditions herself. And again, that, you know, you avoid multiple pregnancy, because again, that's more risky.
Right.
You're more, you know, so just to protect the surrogate. And those things ultimately protect the baby as well, because if a mother develops high blood pressure, she may have to be delivered prematurely. That's not good for the baby either. So they're all medical safeguards.
Okay.
I suppose when somebody is pregnant carrying their own child, they know the pregnancy is risky, but at least they have the joy of having a child at the end of it, whereas the surrogate isn't going to have that reward. She's not having the baby, so we need to be even more mindful of the surrogate. Counselling, I think counselling is absolutely crucial. I'm not sure that it's necessary for everybody undergoing IVF, but for anywhere where there is a third party involved, such as donor pregnancies or surrogacy, it really is crucial for everybody involved, for the intending parents, for the surrogate, for the surrogate's family, if she has a partner, sometimes for the surrogate's children, because one of the stipulations is that the surrogate must have had children before.
Right.
So her children need to be aware that she's going to be pregnant, but they're not going to be keeping the baby. It's not going to be their brother or sister. So there's a huge amount of counselling that needs to go into that whole family relationship. During surrogacy, I think everybody would agree, and again, those international medical bodies say that the surrogate needs to have autonomy during the pregnancy. So she is responsible for any decisions relating to her and her body during the pregnancy. Most of the time there isn't a problem, but there can be situations, for example, if the intending parents decide they would like to have prenatal testing to check for genetic abnormalities in early pregnancy, that needs to be discussed in advance with the surrogate so that the surrogate is happy to have that. Then if, God forbid, the baby has a problem, there can be situations where the intending parents might want to have a termination of pregnancy. The surrogate might not want to agree with that. So all those kind of scenarios need to be, as far as possible, raised beforehand. And certainly our experience in doing that is that we can have a very open discussion between the surrogate and her partner, if she has one and he's going to be involved, or her, and the intending parents. And usually those kind of things, it's always better to think about them in advance.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Things like if they're friends, and often they are, or sisters, how do you address that with the surrogate's children and the intending parents' children in the future? Because they're all going to be meeting each other. So all those, they're just some of the things that spring to mind about counselling. So again, I think the more we can insist on that in Ireland, and with domestic surrogacy, we can be sure that that is happening. But I think you can also, we see it, you can see clinics abroad who do provide counselling, or, we can always provide counselling here, even for people who are having international surrogacy, just so they think about those kind of things in advance and are aware of them. The final comment was about funding. Funding in IVF treatment and fertility treatment is really difficult, because how long is a piece of string? And there are so many different scenarios. And I suppose it worries me that everybody is saying we have to get the legislation in first, but there's an awful lot of things we need to think about that have nothing to do with the legislation, and I don't think anybody is thinking about that. So who would be eligible for funding? So at the moment, a cycle of IVF costs around, even in our clinic, which is not for profit, but it's also not for loss, so we have to charge, because we have to fund all the people who work, and it's very labour intensive. It costs around €6,000 for an IVF cycle. If the woman is under 35, there's around a 50% chance of getting a baby from that. And if you're lucky, you might even get 2 children, and some people get 3. Okay. But if you're 40, you've got a 20% chance of getting having a baby from that treatment. So, some couples can easily end up spending €20,000 trying to have a baby. There's no public funding for anybody, whether you have a medical card, you don't have a medical card, whether you're on minimum wage. There's no help for anybody. And even for people like myself who are doctors, they really struggle to fund IVF, especially if they have medical problems and it doesn't go easily for them. On the other hand, we can't fund everybody, so we will have to make decisions like, if somebody has 3 children already, do they qualify for funding, do they not? Do we fund donor sperm for same-sex couples? There's an awful lot we need to be thinking about. It's not going to be popular, and I think that's maybe one of the reasons why no politician is going to stand up and say, well, these people can't have funding and these people can. It's not going to be easy, and we really need to start working on it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Could I just just something on the counselling, just something that the Senator touched on earlier. There's a lot of talk about counselling and about counselling beforehand, but I think it's important, maybe not in legislation, but to be part of the conversation that counselling, particularly in surrogacy or where you have a third-party donor, it needs to be an ongoing thing. And as the child gets older and as discussions become more complicated, sometimes parents or even the surrogates, if they're still involved, will need the support of a counsellor on how to approach it with the child, how best to discuss it, and that it should, just to be noted somewhere in there, that once you've done your counselling, it's not just a tick box before you start this process. It may be ongoing for hopefully for the life of the child.
Because
Yeah,
I
it's
think you
important.
told me yesterday about
I think Victoria, at least, now I haven't checked in a while, but the state of Victoria have a good support, at least had a very good support system in terms of disclosure, and when parents, as disclosure develops, as a child gets older and understands more and asks, I guess, more involved questions, that they can continuously go back to a support service to say, okay, I coped until the child was 10
Yes,
and
yeah,
now
no,
I don't know how to explain the next level,
Yeah.
and that is important to consider somewhere, and particularly for funding, that it's something that
Yeah,
people
that's
may need
important.
in the
Yeah.
long term.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Excellent. Can I just clarify, is that the state of Victoria in Australia?
Sorry,
Okay.
yes.
Great, thank you.
And as just, it is, my information is, it's been a few years since I checked, so I would go back and check again that it
Yeah.
still exists, but certainly it did in relation to third-party donors.
Okay, excellent, thank you.